Hey, congrats everyone on making it to the last day of Coalesce. Yay! I'm losing my voice, so I'm going to try to get through this presentation while I still have it in me, and then probably go to bed. Hello, welcome to A Skeptic's Guide to Marketing Analytics. I'm Amanda Fioritto. I'm an analytics engineer at Hex, and I'm here to talk to you about marketing attribution, but maybe not in the way that you think, and hopefully not in the way that you think. Because it's a truth that's universally acknowledged. We've all heard the phrase, attribution isn't real. It's entirely made up. We've seen the tweets, the mugs, the memes, and if you've ever been asked to actually build an attribution model, then you've also probably shared in the collective groan of data practitioners everywhere. I know this because I was once just a girl standing in front of a Zoom screen being asked to build an attribution model, and I really, really deeply did not want to. But after that call, I was thinking to myself that if attribution is entirely made up, if it's just fake, what if I can remake it and reshape it into something that is perhaps more delightful for me personally to build, and perhaps actually more useful and functional for my team? What if this non-existence is actually its most empowering quality? Just a thought. So yes, I'm a skeptic about attribution, but that doesn't mean that I just did nothing. Of course we can't do that. So in this talk, I'm going to share my experience of building a marketing analytics framework that actually worked for my team and provided us with a deeper level of understanding about our marketing motion than traditional attribution would have allowed us to do at the time. Like any good story, it starts with a data request from a stakeholder. This is the request I received about a year ago. My stakeholder wanted a data model that would allow them to attribute key milestones to various marketing efforts. But interestingly, they also explicitly asked for the optionality to play around with different methodologies, different conversions, and just have flexibility in general. And this is the part that got my gears turning and allowed me to think more broadly about attribution. Now, before I go any further, it's worth pointing out that just because someone has a data request doesn't mean that there's a need to fulfill this request, or that even if there is a need, that it has to be done immediately. If that were the case, data practitioners would be short order cooks, and we would all be miserable and hate our lives. But it's also our job to listen to our stakeholders when they come to us with a pain point and try to evaluate what's going on underneath that request. Figure out what the actual need is and not just serve the language that they're using to describe that pain point. If we can do that, then we can craft the right solutions that actually address their pain and ameliorate it, while also aligning to our broader visions and goals on a data team. That's what we did. Everyone wins in this situation. Stakeholders receive something actionable, and data practitioners actually enjoy their day-to-day jobs. When we did this, we uncovered a need that was present for folks beyond just the marketing team. We were hearing different versions of this pain across the company, and we were able to bring all of those pain points together and build something that worked not just for this one stakeholder, but for everyone across Hex. And in order to do this, it can be really compelling to just jump right into code. We're data practitioners, it's what we love to do. But it's really important in order to evaluate a request and to give shape to a solution that you ground this in your why. Within the Hex data team, we like to ask ourselves and others why a lot, to the point that most people on our team probably think of us as toddlers. Adorable, but pretty annoying because we're always asking questions. I can't overstress, though, how important this is, clarifying your why at the start of a massive undertaking. It seems like it slows you down, but it actually allows you to go so much faster afterwards, and it avoids sinking time and resources into something that just ends up not working and needs to be ripped out. So for us, we started asking ourselves and our stakeholders questions, like, is our business even well-suited to the attribution framework that you're asking us for? When we asked ourselves this question, we were kind of surprised by the answer that we got. Because this is kind of how traditional attribution works. You have a person who doesn't know that your business exists. They're sad until one day they come across an ad that you're serving in the magical land of Twitter or X or whatever we're calling that website these days. And they find it incredibly persuasive, so they click on it, they buy whatever you're selling, they become a customer, they're happy, you're happy, everyone wins. Very linear, very direct. It's a really compelling progression because it's pretty easy to conceptualize and to model, and in fact, we've all seen this play out. This is how one night I went from mindlessly scrolling Instagram to the proud new owner of $200 cashmere pajamas. You know, like, it works. And it works pretty well for B2C companies where the reality actually is this simplistic. But the question that we were facing is this how Hex works? And the reality here is that Hex doesn't quite work this linearly. We have a ton of different ways that people interact with us on a day-to-day basis. Of course, they see ads in our web efforts like SEO, SEM, paid ads, but they also come to us through webinars, through conference booths like the one that we have here at Coalesce. They hang out with us at meetups that we host, they read our blog, they talk to our wonderfully talented sales team, and they cycle through all of these things multiple times and then eventually, hopefully, become customers. So it's kind of a messy spaghetti ball. It's not this like very direct and linear and only on the web situation that we have going here at Hex. And this doesn't really fit into most traditional attribution models. The other question we had to ask ourselves was, is now the right time to do this? We have the request, but is it worth doing right now? And in this scenario, we actually made a case for slowing things down a little bit. We had to ask ourselves, is this request representative of a clear and present need? And in this case, we actually said, yeah. Once we started asking more questions, we uncovered pain points across the company that were related to knowing how people come to Hex, what delights them about the process, and what keeps them happy customers. Everyone around the team was starting to ask those questions, not just one team. But when we asked ourselves if we need a hard and fast answer to this question, the answer was explicitly no. Our stakeholders had asked for something explorational, something flexible. They wanted to get their hands dirty with the data. They didn't just want to be served an answer right away. They wanted to explore trends. And finally, we had to ask ourselves, where are we as a team, as a company, in terms of our marketing motion? And at this time last year, when these questions were starting to arise, we were just at the beginning of all of this. We had, I think, one person on our marketing and growth team who was starting to ask these questions, but we didn't have anyone else on our marketing team yet. We didn't have leadership who could help us with strategic direction to figure out some of this stuff, and we were just getting started with SEO and SEM initiatives. So we were young. And finally, we had to ask ourselves, like, okay, if there's a clear and present need, if it's time to do something about this, what are we going to do? What methodology do we choose? And honestly, this is one of my biggest pet peeves, and one of the biggest reasons that I'm a skeptic about attribution, because the answer is no one really knows what methodology to choose. There are so many of them. I've heard of first touch, last touch, linear, multi-touch linear, multi-touch decay, whatever that is. And there is just so many options, but there's no universally accepted framework for how to evaluate the trade-offs between all of these different methodologies to pick the one that's right for you and your business. We certainly didn't know the answer to this question, and in fact, we didn't really care. That stakeholder request said, I want to be able to play around with this and tinker and figure out what works for us. I don't want to just be locked into an answer. I don't want to over-engineer something and overcomplicate something that we're not really even sure works for us. So at the end of all this questioning, it was pretty clear that we needed a new approach. There was a need. We had to solve it. We wanted to know what brought customers to Hex, what delighted them, and how to keep them happy. But our business didn't totally fit the attribution model that we were seeing at other companies, online, within our communities. We valued exploration over hard and fast answers, and we didn't really have any preference or understanding of how to choose and lock ourselves into a given methodology. So what do you do when the best practice is no longer a best practice for your business? If you're us, you make up something else entirely. Step into a brave new world. Not the dystopian hellscape of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World by any means, but it is a little bit scary nonetheless. You're stepping into uncharted territory. And if you're going to step into uncharted territory, then the first thing that I can tell you is that you absolutely cannot go at it alone. First of all, if you say out loud to your team, I think I'm going to rebuild marketing attribution today, they're going to think that you've gone crazy, and they're going to ask if you're okay. It's kind of weird to just say, I'm going to rebuild this thing that's a best practice. And more importantly, technical decisions aren't just about the technology that's available. Data decisions aren't just about data. These things are about people and process, so it means it's also about trust. And if you want to build trust, then you have to trust your team to build the thing with you. I spent a lot of time aligning on these principles with my team before I even touched a line of code, which is like deeply unsatisfying to me. I would much rather be in the code, but this was so much more beneficial because it helped us align our direction and build something together that we could all be proud of. So we had to determine what kind of interactions we wanted to count, not just the traditional web marketing, but also those more personable in-person touches like webinar participation, in-person event attendance like meetups and conferences. We had to determine which conversions mattered. We didn't want to just pick one conversion. There's lots of different milestones at Hex that are important to us. Things like signing up for a trial, entering a sales cycle with us, becoming a paying customer. All of these things are things that we wanted to be able to measure and look at and evaluate. And then finally, we had to build a process by which we could continue to remain flexible and build iteratively over time. We wanted to be able to deliver a solution to our stakeholders, yes, but we also wanted to be able to learn from it, to continuously improve it, and to avoid over-engineering something upfront that we were just going to have to rip out in a couple months. Once we aligned to these principles, we had to look at what we had at our disposal. Just because you're stepping into uncharted waters doesn't mean that you have to start entirely from scratch. At Hex, we were already using Salesforce and the campaign object to store data on some of these more in-person touches, like meetup lists, webinar registrations. And this was great because campaigns let you tie contacts, who are people, to campaign efforts, which are touches, and create this thing called campaign members, a unique combination of a person and a marketing effort. And it puts it in Salesforce where people are already doing their go-to-market work, where the sales team's already working. So as salespeople are interacting with prospects and customers, they can see what you've been interacting with at Hex to understand what's important to you, what you're interested in, and better drive conversations that are more personable and more practical for you. Since this was already our operational home for some of these less traditionally tracked efforts, we decided that we could probably maintain this as a source of truth for all marketing efforts because one home is better than two, which is better than three. We might as well keep everything together in one source of truth. There were, of course, limitations to this. Salesforce has a lot of opinions about things. And so you can only do this, right, if you have understanding of who the contact is, if you have a contact ID for them in Salesforce, and if you're tracking your campaigns. So you need to know the person, and you need to know the campaign that you're working on in order to do this. And you can only create a connection once. So the unique combination of contact and campaign ID is truly unique. You can't have multiple interactions. But what if you have a marketing effort that is continuous over time, and someone can come back and interact with it again and again? How do you do that? These were the limitations that we had to consider, but the great thing is that we already had aligned our data philosophy at Hex, that our data warehouse and DBT and the data side of the house and our Salesforce RevOps side of the house would come together and create a symbiotic ecosystem, and we knew that we could solve this problem with those principles. If you were here at Coalesce last year, my colleague Erica gave a talk on this called Salesforcelandia, the magical world of data and RevOps harmony. It was great. You should check it out. It was delightful. And basically, it covers how we built this symbiotic relationship. So I knew that we had done it with some of our more sales-oriented data problems, and so I had an idea that we could do it again with marketing information. Because the relationship really is symbiotic, even though it doesn't seem like it right away. DBT gives to Salesforce a lot of things that Salesforce cannot do on its own, or cannot do very well on its own. Complex data modeling, a lot easier to do in DBT than Salesforce. If you've ever tried it, you probably know my pain. It also gives you rich context from other data sources that Salesforce otherwise wouldn't know about, like segment events that we use to capture web marketing. And Salesforce, in turn, gives stuff to DBT, a CRM's worth of data to tie in with other data sources around your company and democratize across your company. And it also serves a home for data that isn't easily captured anywhere, like registration signups, meetup attendance lists, et cetera. So in terms of marketing analytics, the way that I had to use the symbiotic relationship was something like taking a bunch of ugly, complicated segment data that was a mess and cleaning it up with DBT to make it mean something about our marketing efforts. Who did the action? What were they interacting with? Where did they come from? What UTMs were attached? When did it happen? Create a tidier model on top of all this event data that we were receiving. And then attach that data somehow to a Salesforce campaign to create that one single source of truth for all marketing efforts. We were pretty forward-thinking when we started this, which was great, because we decided that when we were going to do online marketing things, we were going to set a UTM equal to the Salesforce campaign ID that we were tracking. So we already created that foreign key that we could use to join in a high-touch sync that sent this segment data model from DBT into Salesforce in the campaign object, thus creating campaign members for every type of marketing effort that we had, both in person and online. Once it was in Salesforce, we could then use Fivetran to pull all that data back into DBT and operate over a full breadth of marketing data, not just segment events. It was a lot of work, but it was really a game changer for our sales team, who now could see the entire history of marketing touches at their fingertips inside of Salesforce where they were doing the work. But our sales team wasn't the only team that cared about this information, right? The request started with our marketing and growth team. Our leadership also wanted to see the data, and none of them are working in Salesforce. So the next part of this problem was that we had to get this data back out to the people where they could use it also. And this gave birth to the campaign impact dashboard, which we built in Hex, because we're Hex. Pretty obvious. So we really grounded this dashboard in the principle of flexibility and accessibility. Because it's in Hex, anyone at Hex can see it, because everyone has access to our Hex system. So everyone can access this and see the same data that we've put in Salesforce for our sales team. It's flexible. It's very interactive. You get to choose where to start. You can begin your search either with assets, the things that people are interacting with, like attending a meetup, reading a particular blog, going to a sign-up link, or you can start by channels, paid ads, direct search, SEO, things that tell you how they get to where they're going. Once you've decided assets or channels, you can pick the campaigns or the marketing efforts that matter most to you in the questions that you want to ask. And importantly, you can set your own attribution window, because we know that a bunch of different marketing events probably have different timelines and horizons to making an impact. Seeing us and talking to us at the conference booth this week probably has a longer horizon to you all becoming customers of Hex than, for instance, clicking an ad and starting a free trial. These attribution windows are different, and they matter depending on what you're trying to accomplish in this dashboard. So we're going to let you have the flexibility to set your attribution window yourself and to play around with it and figure out what's right for you. Once you've set your parameters, you can start to dive into this data. We start folks off with a high-level overview, some very basic summary statistics, how many people are in this campaign, when over time have they been added to the campaign if it's an ongoing effort, and we can begin to break this down by ICP, ideal customer profile, to figure out who within this campaign is most likely to derive value from Hex and to want to use Hex. From there, we can also dive into the details. Because it's in Hex, it has all the bells and whistles that Hex has to offer, like our explore function, which allows people to take the underlying data in any of these tool analyses and explode it out into their own project, go on side quests, answer their own questions that they might have. But we've also preempted some of their questions. For instance, in conversion to new sales opportunities, we want to know how many of these touches are entering our sales cycle. We can break this down by either number of opportunities created or predicted pipeline generated within these opportunities. We can break it down by specific campaigns if we want to compare across a couple different efforts. We can break it down by stage, how many of these are up funnel and down funnel in our sales process. Break it down by our reps to see how different people in our team are interacting with people who have interacted with marketing efforts. And we can also consider campaign attribution and influence. So if they're within that attribution window, if the opportunity was created within that window that we set, we can reasonably say this opportunity probably had something to do with this person interacting with a marketing event. If it's influenced, we can say it's really great that they interacted with that marketing event, but it probably had nothing to do with this opportunity creation, though it might be helpful down the line. Similarly, some people on our team may be more interested in self-service than the sales cycle. So we can see how many signups and trials were created, and again, consider attribution windows versus influence. We can determine who took a given action after a marketing touch. So if someone comes to a webinar, is it that person that then goes and signs up for a trial? Or did they attend your webinar and then go tell their friend at work how cool Hex was, and that person signed up for a webinar? Again, this is all information that we wouldn't have had previously, but helps us differentiate and specialize our outreach to prospects. And then we can get into the details. Who created the org? When did they create the org? How far into their trial are they? What kind of activities are they doing within their trial? All to better direct our conversations with them as prospects. And finally, we can look at the user journey. So if we started with assets, the things that people landed on, we can look at what channels did they take to get to those assets. If we started with channels, what avenues are people taking to get to Hex? We can see what those avenues led to. What kind of blog posts are they interacting with? What things are they signing up for? What kind of webinars are they signing up for? And see how folks are getting to us and how they're interacting with us at a deeper level than we could have otherwise. The concept of campaign impact was really well received by our marketing and sales teams, and this app gets a ton of use. In fact, I just saw a linear ticket get opened earlier this morning about adding additional information to this app. It's something that is flexible and iterative and is a living, breathing tool that we use on a daily basis. It's a new world that we built. It was a little scary to do, but it was possible, and it was actually very beneficial for us. If you're thinking about building a new world, I would just caution you to keep in mind these 5 principles. Start with your why. It can be really exciting to just dive right into something, but if you don't start by grounding yourself in the reason for this project, you're going to sink a lot of time and into work that you might need to undo in the long run. And once you've understood your why, you can go further and faster by pulling your team into the process and having them create this world with you. It'll be a lot easier if you've all agreed up front about what this world is going to accomplish and what it's not going to accomplish. Thirdly, tell the story that you need to tell. Campaign Impact Dashboard works for us because it mirrors the kind of customer journeys that our customers take to us and the kind of business process that we had at the time it was built. It might not work for you, and that's okay. You have to anchor into what matters most for you and your company. And once you've built it, it's really important to take your data to the people. There's nothing more unsatisfying than like building a dashboard or building a model and then it just kind of sits and doesn't get used. You have to make sure that it's delightful and sticky for your stakeholders such that they're actually using it, reacting to it, and helping you improve it. And finally, you have to remember that nothing is perfect. Campaign impact is just as made up as attribution is. I made it up. I can tell you that. It's not real. I made it up. But it's helpful for our team. And so while there are limitations to this approach, it's important to just stick to your convictions, be honest and upfront about where those limitations are, try to mitigate them where you can, and commit to the goal. This means that it could change over time. It's not easy. It's much more rewarding, though, than looking at a number or an analysis and not really knowing what to do with it, or just watching your team kind of languish after being served an attribution model that doesn't really tell them anything. So this new world is yours to build. Go forward with the confidence and conviction of Sue Sylvester and build what works for you and your team. Hex is here to help you, and so am I. I'll be around to answer any questions that you have, and I hope you have a great rest of your last day of Coalesce.